Don't! The word came out soft, almost gentle. The kind of voice used to settle a nervous horse or talk someone down from the edge of a roof. Willa Deschênes wasn't afraid. She was giving them one last chance to save themselves, and they were too busy laughing to notice. The three men by the tailgate of the F-350 hadn't processed what was standing in front of them. The one with the neck tattoo, the one who mattered, was already taking a step toward Hawk, one hand extended like he was going to grab the Malinois by the collar. Hawk didn't bark. He didn't lunge. He sat at Willa's left heel with his amber eyes fixed on the outstretched hand and the absolute depthless focus of a predator that had already calculated the distance and decided it preferred to wait. That stillness was what they should have been afraid of. They weren't. The Carpenter Creek Forest Service road wound deep into the Selkirk backcountry, a narrow dirt track flanked by cedar and Douglas fir that didn't see more than a handful of hikers a week this far in. It was mid-October, the larches had turned gold, and the morning fog rolling off the lake below still clung to the lower switchbacks in slow grey curtains. For 29-year-old Willa Deschênes, the isolation was the point. She'd driven 4 hours from Kelowna to be somewhere that wasn't a base, wasn't a classroom, wasn't a briefing room with bad coffee, and a whiteboard full of movement diagrams. She had 7 days of leave. She intended to spend every one of them walking. On her official file with the Department of National Defense, Willa was listed as a contract environmental assessment technician, level 3. Unremarkable. The kind of posting that made eyes slide off a page in the classified annex of Kansofcom's personnel records, the one that required 2 separate clearances and a physical key to open. She was listed as a Tier 1 Close-Quarters Combat Master Instructor, embedded with Joint Task Force 2's Advanced Development Program since age 25. She was the person who taught the country's most lethal special operators how to clear a room in the dark, how to end a confrontation in the first 2 seconds before it became a firefight, how to neutralize a threat with their hands when the rifle was down and the radio was dead and there was nothing left but the body and whatever lived inside it. She was very good at her job. But today she just wanted to walk. Hawk moved at her left heel without a leash, his gait matched perfectly to hers, his ears rotating in slow arcs through the still morning air. He was a Belgian Malinois, coat the color of dried autumn grass, with the low-slung, effortless movement of something that had spent its working life learning to be invisible in the spaces between. The scar on his left shoulder, a ragged white crescent, where a 7.62 round had clipped him outside Bamako during a Kansofcom joint operation 3 years prior, had faded to silver in the mountain air. He was 8 years old, officially retired. His handlers at Kansofcom had called the retirement a gift. Willa had simply asked if she could take him home, and no one had argued with her, which told her more about how they felt about him than any ceremony would have. Hawk had spent 5 years clearing compounds in Mali, locating IED belts hidden in market ceilings that bomb disposal had walked past twice, running down high-value targets through drainage canals in complete darkness. He had done all of it in silence, on command, or without command when the situation called for it. He was not a pet. He was a partner who happened to walk on 4 legs. They heard the truck before they saw it, a diesel engine, idling rough, somewhere around the switchback ahead. Willa slowed without thinking. Beside her, Hawk slowed too, his nose tipping upward to read the air. They came around the corner and stopped. A Ford F-350 dark green extended cab, a broken side mirror held on with electrical tape, was parked sideways across the service road, blocking it completely. 3 men occupied the space around it. One sitting on the tailgate, one leaning against the passenger door with his arms folded, one who had just pushed himself off the hood and was standing upright in the middle of the track with his thumbs in his belt loops. That last one was Boyd Kramer. Willa didn't know his name yet, but she read him in the first 3 seconds. late 30s, wide through the shoulders, a tribal tattoo climbing his neck toward his left ear, a hunting knife clipped to his belt, and a particular stillness that wasn't calm. It was the practiced stillness of someone who'd used size and the threat of violence to get what he wanted so many times that it had become reflex. His record, which Willa would learn about later, included 2 convictions for aggravated assault, a stayed trafficking charge, and an active warrant out of Nelson for parole violation. The man on the tailgate was Lorne Hassett, wiry, late 20s, with the jaw-clenching restlessness of someone burning something chemical. He was turning a folding knife over and over between his fingers, not as a threat, just as something to do with his hands. The one against the door was Gage Noakes, big in the way that comes from years of hard physical work, and then stopping, a length of logging chain looped over one shoulder like it weighed nothing. Willa didn't stop walking. She slowed to a natural halt about 12 feet from Boyd, shifted the strap of her pack, and stood there with her hands relaxed at her sides. Her center of gravity had dropped a fraction of an inch, her shoulders settled. She was relaxed in the way that nothing in the wilderness is ever truly relaxed. "Morning," she said. "Mind moving the truck a few feet? Just need to get through." Boyd looked at her the way men like him looked, slow, assessing, filing things away. His gaze moved past her to Hawk. Something shifted in his expression. Not fear. Interest. "Trail's closed," he said. His voice was pleasant the way a tight rope is pleasant to look at before it snaps. "Private road." "It's a Forest Service road." Willa's voice was completely flat. "Crown land, public access." "Not today." Lorne slid off the tailgate. Gage uncurled from the door. The 3 of them arranged themselves across the track without appearing to coordinate it. A formation Willa had seen before, in different countries, under different skies, on men who were considerably better at it than these 3. "Nice animal," Boyd said, nodding at Hawk. "Belgian Malinois. Good muscle on him. Those go for a lot to the right buyer." Willa was quiet for 2 full seconds. Around them, the cedars dripped with morning condensation. A raven called somewhere up the ridge and went still. "Don't," she said. Boyd smiled. "Don't what? I'm just saying." "You're not." She held his eyes. "Last chance. Get in the truck. Turn it around, drive back down the hill. We both pretend this morning didn't happen." He took a step forward. "Leave the dog, empty the pack. You walk down on your own. No one gets hurt." Hawk let out a sound then. Not a bark, not a growl. A low-frequency vibration that seemed to come from his chest and travel through the ground. His eyes hadn't moved from Boyd's face. Willa set her hand lightly on the top of Hawk's head. Once, the sound stopped. He went still again, every muscle coiled, trembling faintly, not from fear, from the effort of restraint. "I'm going to say this once," Willa said. The conversational register was gone. What replaced it was the same clinical precision she used in training rooms when she needed an operator to understand that what followed was not a drill. "Get back in your truck, turn it on, and drive away. That is the only version of this morning where all 3 of you go home the same way you arrived." Lorne made a sound that was supposed to be a laugh. It came out thinner than he intended. Gage let the logging chain slip off his shoulder and into his right hand. He swung it once, low. "Take the dog," Boyd said. Gage moved. He came in from the left with the chain swinging at ankle height, not aimed at Willa, at Hawk. The logic was practical. Take the dog out first, deal with the woman second. He never connected. Willa stepped left and into the arc of the swing, closing the distance in a single committed step before the chain had finished its travel. Her right forearm intercepted his wrist at the apex of the motion, not blocking, trapping, using his forward drive against him. The heel of her left palm connected with the hinge of his jaw, not a punch, a structural strike aimed at the joint itself. The sound was a flat crack, absorbed immediately by the fog and the trees. Gage's knees folded. Willa caught his collar, used his own momentum, planted her hip and rotated. 190 pounds of man left the ground. He landed on his back with a sound that sent a grouse flushing from the brush 30 feet away, a percussive full-body impact that evacuated his lungs in one hard burst. The chain landed in the gravel beside Hawk, who had not moved. Lorne's knife was already open. He'd snapped it at the moment Gage went down. A 4-inch blade, tanto tip, held in the grip of someone who'd used a knife before and understood that carrying it low and close was more dangerous than displaying it wide. He came forward with it at his hip. "Hawk higher, stay close." The Malinois moved to her immediate left and sat, body angled forward, watching the knife hand with the patient attention of an animal that understood exactly what it was looking at. Lorne cut fast, a tight horizontal slash aimed at her leading wrist. She pulled it back, felt the air of the blade inside an inch, let it complete its travel. Before his arm had finished the arc, she stepped hard to his outside line. Her right elbow came across the inside of his forearm, not blocking, redirecting, using the force of his own motion to wrench his knife hand away from her body. Her left hand closed on his wrist. She pulled him off balance, driving his weight forward, and brought her knee up hard into his solar plexus. Lorne's body folded. She pulled him down into a second strike, released him, and he went to the gravel face first. Not unconscious, but entirely unable to do anything except instruct his lungs to work again. The knife landed in the dirt beside him. 4 seconds, 2 men down. Boyd had gone very still. The color had left his face. He was looking at Willa the way people look at something they have catastrophically miscalculated. The rapid reprocessing of information, the late arrival of understanding. His right hand had drifted to his waistband, where the outline of a handgun pressed against his jacket from inside. "Don't touch that," Willa said. His hand stopped. She walked toward him, not rushing, just steadily, until she was 6 feet away and he had backed up against the door of his own truck. She held his eyes the entire time. "You draw that firearm," she said quietly, "and I take it from you, and I use it. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Boyd's jaw worked. He looked at Gage, who was on his side in the dirt and still hadn't managed to sit up. He looked at Lorne face down in the gravel. He looked back at Willa. His hand dropped away from his waistband. "Who the hell are you?" he said. His voice had lost its shape entirely. "No one you want to know." She stepped back, pulled 3 flex cuffs from her cargo pocket, bound Boyd's wrists behind him and looped the tail through the handle of his own truck door. Did the same to Lorne. Wrists behind, ankles together, moved into the ditch. Gage she guided by the elbow, shuffle-walking, and put him there too, zip-tied at the wrists to the same length of deadfall. Then she pulled out her satellite communicator, a spot unit clipped to her pack strap, and composed a message for the Nakusp RCMP detachment. Location coordinates, 3 individuals, non-life-threatening injuries, requesting patrol response. Hawk sat in the center of the road and watched the 3 men with his amber eyes and the absolute serenity of something that didn't need to press an advantage because it already knew the outcome. It was while composing the second message to a number she had memorized rather than stored that she noticed the tarp. The truck bed was covered with a green poly tarp lashed with bungee cords. The lashing had partially come loose in the scuffle. One corner had folded back. She almost didn't look. The men were secured. The RCMP message was sent. This was, by any practical measure, finished. But beneath that flipped corner, partially visible, were the edges of grey Pelican cases. Pelican cases were everywhere in rural BC. Gearboxes, photography kit, fishing equipment. Not unusual, she would have walked past them. Except these were stenciled, and the stenciling was in a font she recognized in her bones. She crossed the road and pulled the tarp fully back. 5 cases, hard-sided, military specification grey. The stenciling on the nearest one read DND and SOFCOM, restricted handling, Creedy Series C7. The second case bore a serial prefix she recognized as JTID's compatible encrypted communications hardware. The third was sealed with a tamper-evident band. The fourth had a secondary classification sticker she had only ever seen on Signal's intelligence equipment. Willa stood in the road with the tarp in her hands and the cold October air moving through the cedars around her. Stolen Kansofcom crypto hardware, moving through the Selkirk backcountry in a truck belonging to a parole violator with a trafficking record. This wasn't local opportunism. Someone had planned this. Someone with contacts. Someone who understood what this hardware was and who would pay for it and what they intended to do with it once they had it. She walked back to Boyd. "Who sent you?" He shook his head, mouth pressed flat. She crouched in front of him. "The hardware in your truck doesn't belong to you, to anyone in this province, or to anyone operating inside Canadian law. Whoever you're delivering it to will not protect you when this goes sideways. They will eliminate witnesses. You understand what I'm saying to you?" Boyd held out for 4 more seconds. Then, "They just said it was electronics. Communications gear. We're getting paid $25,000 for the transport. Meetings up the road about 6 kilometers. 2 vehicles. They said to wait." She checked her watch. 9:47. When? 10 o'clock. 13 minutes. She moved all 3 men deeper into the tree line, behind a deadfall invisible from the road in both directions. She took Boyd's Glock, chambered, 1 in the pipe, 13 in the magazine, and tucked it into her waistband. Then she sent the second message. 3 lines to a number she'd never written down. Grid coordinates, DND crypto hardware confirmed. 2 inbound vehicles unknown strength, requesting immediate response. It would reach a CSIS duty officer in Ottawa within 90 seconds. Everything after that was out of her hands. The next 13 minutes were not. She climbed the slope above the road, 50 feet of underbrush and granite, to a natural ledge overlooking the switchback. She could see the F-350 below. She could see 300 meters of road in both directions. She lay flat on the cold rock. Hawk materialized beside her without being called and pressed flat to the earth, tucking his paws beneath him, chin lowering until his coat, the color of pine duff and dried grass, rendered him nearly invisible against the ground. At 09:58 she heard them. 2 vehicles, high clearance, coming up through the switchbacks below. They appeared a minute later, a pair of matte black Toyota Tundras, new model, lifted with aftermarket bumpers and what appeared to be reinforced rear glass. The kind of modifications that cost serious money. The kind of money that didn't come from criminal opportunism. 6 men climbed out. They moved with tactical spacing, heads on a swivel, checking the high ground before anything else. They wore civilian fleece and tactical trousers and carried suppressed short-barreled rifles, with the muscles memory of people who'd done it professionally for a long time in places that didn't appear in news reports. They were not RCMP, they were not military. They were something between. Former operators gone sideways for reasons Willa didn't need to know to understand. The team leader was spare and grey-templed, moving with an economy she recognized immediately. He hadn't gone soft. Whatever had taken him out of legitimate service hadn't taken his edge. He walked to the F-350, pulled back the tarp, counted cases. Then he looked at the disturbed ground, the drag marks, the indentations in the gravel, and raised a closed fist. All 6 men stopped. "We have a problem," he said. "Quiet, controlled. Spread out, weapons free. Find the locals. Find whoever made contact with them. Nobody leaves this road until I have the merchandise in my vehicles and I know what happened here." 2 men broke toward the east slope. 2 held at the trucks. 1 moved south down the road. The team leader stood at the center of the track. Willa looked at Hawk. She tapped his shoulder twice. He raised his head a 1/4 inch. She made 3 hand signals: flank right, stay low, hold until distraction. Hawk dissolved into the underbrush without a sound. The two men climbing the east slope were good, heel to toe, slow, keeping noise down, eyes on their sectors. The lead man had his rifle tucked and was checking the canopy as well as the ground, 6 feet below the ledge when Willa dropped. She landed soft on the slope behind him. He turned on instinct, some vibration, some shift in the air, and found her already inside his reach. She trapped his rifle with her left forearm, pressed her weight forward to break his balance, and drove the butt of the Glock into the base of his skull. Controlled, precise, enough to end the conversation without ending him. He went down into the ferns without a sound. The second man spun. His rifle came to his shoulder. His cheek touched the stock. From the cedar boughs above him, 60-odd pounds of Belgian Malinois left the branch without a sound. Hawk hit him across the upper back and shoulders, pure mass and velocity. The impact drove him face first into the hillside. His rifle discharged once into the earth, the suppressor turning the shot into a flat, percussive thud. Hawk's jaws closed on his right forearm before he could bring the weapon back around. Willa was already there, forearm to the throat, weight applied, and he stopped moving. Hawk, ouse. Hawk released, stewed over the man with his chest moving and his eyes completely calm. 2 down, no radio communication from either. 12 seconds elapsed. On the road below, the team leader had gone still at the muffled discharge. He tapped his earpiece. Vos Citrip. Static. Kettner respond. Nothing. His jaw tightened. He raised his hand, and the remaining 3 men drew in around the trucks. Willa walked out of the tree line. She walked onto the road 30 meters from the nearest tundra, with the Glock at her side, not raised. She stood in the middle of the track in her hiking clothes and her scuffed trail boots, and looked at the team leader with the same flat expression she used when she needed an operator to understand, with no room for misinterpretation, that the thing they were about to do was the wrong thing. The team leader stared at her. "It's a woman," said the man on his left. "One person." "Where is the rest of your element?" the team leader called across the distance. "There's no element," Willa said. He looked at her for 3 seconds. Then he saw her hands, the way she was standing, the fact that she had walked out of the same trees where 2 of his people had gone silent without sending any radio traffic. "Weapons free," he said. 3 rifles came up. From somewhere to the north, over the ridge, a sound rolled through the mountains. Rotors, low and fast, a CH-146 Griffon coming in hard, dropping altitude quickly toward the valley floor. And from the lower switchback, headlights, 2 marked RCMP ERT vehicles, black, followed by an unmarked white Sprinter van with an antenna array on the roof that Willa recognized without needing to see the plates. The helicopter crested the tree line, directly above the road, close enough to blast dust from the gravel, and the loudspeaker engaged. "RCMP Emergency Response Team, drop all weapons, face down on the ground. Do it now." The team leader stood completely still for 5 full seconds, rifles up, calculating. 6 trained men, 1 woman, a Griffon at 50 feet, and a road full of ERT operators with their own rifles leveled from behind the vehicle's open doors. He lowered his weapon. He went to his knees. The others followed 1 at a time, slowly, the way things fall when the first one goes. Willa walked forward and handed the Glock to the first ERT officer who reached her. A sergeant, tall, body armor over his jacket, tactical helmet pushed back from his forehead. He looked at the men face down on the road. He looked at the 2 men on the hillside, being carefully extracted by his teammates. He looked at the 3 bound men in the ditch behind the deadfall. He looked at Hawk, who had materialized at Willa's left heel without being called, and was sitting with his head slightly tilted, watching the ERT officers work with the patient professional attention he'd once directed toward much darker things. The sergeant looked back at Willa. "Ma'am," he said carefully. He tried again. "Did you?" Willa reached into her jacket and produced a small black credential case. She held it out. He opened it, read the interior card, looked up, looked back down. The gold embossing identified her unit, her rank, and her authorization level with Kansofcom. The sergeant's expression moved through surprise, recalibration, and something that landed somewhere between reluctant respect and deep relief that this had not gone any other way. He handed it back. "We'll need a statement," he said. "You'll have one." She took the case and put it away. She unclipped the lead from her pack strap and snapped it onto Hawk's collar, not because he needed it, but because the helicopter was loud and she wanted him to feel her hand. He leaned into her leg for one moment, pressing his flank against her shin, and then straightened and turned back to watch the ERT officers move through the scene with the same focused calm he'd given to the compound clearances and the canal runs and every other dark place she'd taken him. She looked down the road, at the last of the fog lifting out of the Carpenter Creek valley, at the larches burning gold above the ridge, at the whole quiet and specific beauty of an October morning in the Selkirks that she had driven 4 hours to find. "Anything you need from us right now?" the sergeant asked. No. Willa picked up her pack from where she'd set it in the dirt. She looked at the road ahead, still open, still empty, still winding up through the cedars toward the high country. "I'm just out for the hike." She turned away from the trucks, away from the men on the ground, and the rotors cutting the cold air above her, and walked back into the trees. Hawk moved at her left heel, his gait perfectly matched to hers, his scarred shoulder silver in the morning light. The mist swallowed them both before the sergeant thought to call after her.